So at Berkeley, there wasn't a day, especially in my first semester there, where I was walking around campus in a backpack and like, oh my gosh, they're going to realize that I don't belong here. They're going to look at my transcripts and they're going to say, we made the wrong decision. Just kidding. We're giving your spot to somebody else. And no, it's not you. So it's that feeling like I don't belong, that imposter syndrome.
We are in another episode of the Living Out Loud discussion series, and today we are talking about the first gen experience and what it means for people in professional settings, and we are sitting down for a chat with Julieta Arámburo. I'm Charmaine Utz. I am your host. I am a relational DI expert. If you are new here, we are unpacking real-life scenarios and issues that come up in our interactions together in those various professional settings. And the goal of every single episode is to reveal the layers and the nuances in those interactions so that we can learn about them as a community that cares about diversity, equity, and inclusion. As always, the opinions, the things that are shared in today's conversation, those are my own and not as a representative of any of the agencies that I work for or am contracted by. With me today, I have Julieta. Hi. Thank you for being here.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I have been wanting to sit down with you for quite some time. Just want to share a little bit how I know you and then ask you to tell people how amazing you are. I met you in 2010. 2010, we started our MSW program at Dominguez Hills, and you were instantly somebody, I haven't told you this, but you were goals at the time, like goals. You were and still are, but you at the time were so knowledgeable and had so much humility and grace. And the way that you took up space was you were there and you had a strong presence and it was inviting, but it was also very powerful. Like, I'm not going to ever forget that. And I want you to know that that impacted me. And I learned so much from you.
Thank you for sharing with me. It's just a nice little boost of confidence that I think we all can use at one point or another, right?
Right. Would you mind sharing anything you would like about who you are? It doesn't have to be just professional. It could also be personal.
Sure. So my name is Julieta Arámburo, and I am a first-generation college graduate. I am from a very traditional Mexican-American family. My parents came to the United States around the 70s from Durango, Mexico. And I am the third child out of 4. College was very important in my family. Specifically, my parents came to the U.S. to provide work opportunities for themselves, but also knowing that they already had 2 daughters and a third one on the way to provide a better opportunity for their children, educational opportunities, and also in terms of opportunities in the workforce. I grew up in Hawthorne, so the South Bay, and I really didn't leave Hawthorne forever until right before I graduated from El Camino College. So right after high school, I attended El Camino College, and then my family moved to Compton. But I remember when we made that move, I remember telling my mom, don't even take me into consideration in terms of who is getting what room, because I was already adamant. I am transferring. I am out of here and I am not coming back, right? So I transferred to UC Berkeley. So the first in my family to attend college and graduate from college, and the first in my family to move away as far as I did, which was, unheard of at the time. Yeah. But I came back. I'm back in the South Bay, and I actually have been in education full time for about 20 years. I'm actually into my 20th year now. And I have the joy, the privilege, and the honor to get to work with my community where I grew up and support families and all those who are interested in learning about opportunities in higher education. So that's just a little bit about myself. And then meeting you in 2010, for some reason, I was thinking 2013. But no, it was 2010 when we met. So it's a little bit further back. And it was a scary moment, right? Going to graduate school, first making the decision and then actually doing it. So I'm so happy you shared that because it takes me back to that first orientation meeting date and seeing everybody and feeling scared. What am I doing here? Do I belong here? Is this the right choice? But like you said, we just started making connections and absolutely it was the best choice ever.
Yes, it really was. We got so much from that, and to be in touch with a lot of people from our cohort is also really cool. I don't think that's all like very common.
No.
And then when you were describing like your history, I was remembering you've always, this might not be true for you, but it always felt like you were very rooted in who you are and what you wanted to do and how you wanted to contribute to the industry that we're in. And is that true for you? Because when you said that you've been at El Camino for 20 years, I was like, how did you even arrive at this point where you knew so early and you just had this long career already?
Yeah, so I think I knew it. I sort of knew in my first year in college, spring semester to be exact. I was in a sociology class. My professor's name was Stacey Allen, who I still stay in touch with. And she made such a big difference in my life. She just enlightened me to the world of sociology. And it was at that moment that I knew, number one, this is what I want to study. And in that same time, I also had a very supportive academic counselor, Stephanie Rodriguez. And I knew whatever decision I made academically, she had my back and she was available. And I would tell her, this is what I want to do, but she would lay out the plan for me. And so it was at that moment that I realized, this is what I want to do. I want to come back. I know I want to leave, right? I want to get as far away as I can from the South Bay just because I grew up here. You know, I've been here my whole life. But I want to come back because this is my community. And I want to give to others what people like Stephanie Rodriguez and Stacey Allen did for me, which is just sort of, you know, the light has always been there. I was always a smart child. I was in honors courses in high school, but I didn't have somebody to guide me in terms of you have to keep straight A's, you have to get the grades, you have to get involved. And so that's why I attended El Camino College. And so I knew in that first year that I wanted to return and I wanted to work at El Camino and I wanted to return the favor, right? I saw it as a favor that was done for me. And I also knew I wanted to do that, but I didn't know in what capacity. I didn't know, do I want to teach? Do I want to be a counselor? Do I want to be a staff person? Do I want to be an administrator? And jumping forward into making the decision to get a master's in social work, that choice was very intentional as well, because I was already working in higher education at El Camino College. And I knew that with a master's in social work, I could meet the minimum qualifications to be a counselor or be a teacher or be an administrator. And so that was very intentional. And in that program, I knew I had a really hard time with knowing that I was staying in education and everybody else was already a social worker. That was hard for me, but I think
interesting.
But on the other hand, I feel like you all allowed me into your world, and at the same time, at the end of the day, I think I was able to contribute, like, oh, that education piece that you might not think about in your everyday social work life.
Yeah, you were a major macro person lens too, even though you weren't sure which thing you were going to do. You brought a lens a lot of us weren't using. We weren't using it. I also think that's why you were very impactful and taught us a lot. But even like preparing for this conversation, we were just considering the various ways to look at first gen experience. And there was so much that you were lifting up. It was making me realize I'm in two places. I am in leadership at an organization, and then I work with leaders in organizations, and I work in higher education teaching students, first gen students. And there's not a lot, if any, conversation about it. There wasn't. And it's not surprising, but it also had me sitting there like, okay, I know these are real life things going on. I know people are here with this experience. How interesting. How interesting. A huge gap in DEI space, but it's also something that you live all the time because it's how you all do your work. So I think that because I know that most people do not know what first gen is, it could be very helpful to start there. What is first gen?
Sure. And so there are multiple definitions of what first gen is. And the one that I use in my work is probably one of my favorite ones. And so the general definition is that student who is the first in their immediate family. So neither parent attempted or completed, really completed, neither parent or guardian completed a college degree. In most cases, a college degree is considered that 4-year degree. But, don't forget, we have certificates, career certificates. We have associate degrees as well, trades and whatnot. But the general definition is that not earning a college degree. We take it a little bit of a step further with the students that I work with, and we say, well, no, yes, that is a first-gen student, but we also have students who come to this country whose parents came from other countries as well, right? And so some parents did receive a college degree in another country, but we still say that a student, their child, or if the guardian received a degree outside of the U.S., you are still considered a first-gen student here because the trajectory of the parent or the guardian in another country to earn that degree looks very different than what the trajectory of individuals here in the U.S. Simple language like PSATs and SATs and ACTs, right? All these acronyms. Yeah, simple, right? These things are those that the parents and guardians may not be familiar with because that may not have been the case in another country. So just take it a step further by saying, you're the first in your family whose parent or guardian did not earn a degree in the U.S. is our first student.
Okay. There's also an aspect of this that I'm wondering if you can help untangle too, not just for me, because this comes up a lot, especially in classroom settings. And I know for professors too. When people say first gen, just first gen and nothing after, like you just said first gen, but you also said first gen student. If someone were to say first gen, is that referring to first gen student, or are there other first gen references that are in the mix? And what I'm really saying is some people will say first gen in terms of living here, not necessarily attached to college. Is there a connection? Is there a distinction?
And I think for the most part, as far as I've experienced it, when we do just say first gen, it has nothing to do with immigration status or any of that history. Stacey Allen, for example, is a Caucasian woman who grew up in Orange County, and she's a first gen student. And so we actually did that at El Camino College, where we surveyed our faculty to see how many of our faculty are first gen themselves. And that's how we started the conversation. And that's how the conversation grew at the college. And it was for that reason that a lot of times we wanted to make that distinction. Like, well, there's first gen in the US, but there's that first gen student. And whenever I talk about myself, I always say first gen graduate because I do have my 2 older sisters attempted college, but for whatever reason, one reason or another, neither one of them completed. One completed 1 semester, the other one completed almost a 2nd semester. I always say I'm a first gen graduate because my sisters did attempt, but also my sisters are 10 years older than I am. So whatever experience they had in terms of the matriculation process and the decision-making process was very different than the process that I had because it was 10 years later. And my parents were in another place in terms of the workforce, in terms of their age, in terms of their capacity. So I couldn't really compare my experience to their experience. And that's another thing about the first gen students as well, is that you'll think, well, my sister received a degree, so I'm not first gen anymore. No, you're still first gen. Your parents did. It's all about your parent and your guardian and their status, really. But again, just to go back to your original statement, yeah, we really do not associate first gen with your immigration status.
That's interesting. There are even a couple things that you said I didn't even know. And I'm also thinking about when the topic does come up, how it's talked about, how it's taught. It's vague and you just pick up pieces and you move forward. So I'm also thinking, like, dang, as a professor, and I'm working with a lot of students who are writing about their first gen experience. And I had such a limited understanding of that and what that impact is. Anywho, that's my work to do, but I'm just acknowledging I did not know things, and that will change how I go into this semester that starts in less than 2 weeks. So thank you for that. Just that
that's
baseline
great.
knowledge. I'm telling you, people don't know this. I work with enough people to know they don't know this.
And I think, I mean, come on, we've been El Camino College has been a college for 75 years, but just the fact that the survey was done for faculty was life-changing, and it really set us apart in terms of the first gen work that we do. And I think partially because it's one of those things that either you are first gen or you're not. And you most likely don't know it because you're just living it, right? You're just like, I'm a student. I'm just taking my classes. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to graduate. I'm enrolling in the next semester. I think I'm going to get my degree, or maybe I'm going to. It's just one of those things that you live. And it's not until you pause or you are asked to pause and you talk about that first gen and what it means. And then I remember the first time we did an exercise talking about hidden curriculum. It took me back to my first few years in college, and it made sense. Like, oh, that's what I was feeling. Oh, that's what that was. I get it. That's why that was hard for me internally. And yeah, it's just one of those things that you're just living it. It's not until you pause and let's talk about this. It's like, oh, I am first gen. And it's almost empowering when you learn, what it was. And when you, have this label and you just feel empowered because you realize, wow, then I am that first gen person. I am making that difference for generations to come.
Yes. Okay, there's two things you brought up. One, I know people aren't going to know what hidden curriculum is. So what are you saying? What are you talking about when you say hidden curriculum?
Sure. So just briefly, hidden curriculum is either you're enrolled in a college course, you have your syllabus and there's a curriculum that for the most part, professors have to follow, course record, what are your outcomes, learning objectives, and all that. Yeah. Those are known, right?
Yeah.
So the hidden curriculum are those norms, behaviors, and sets of expectations that college students should have. So things that you sort of know. And I'll give you an example. And this is the example that I knew, my hidden curriculum. I have multiple, but my favorite one was I was a transfer student. So first off, for a transfer student, I didn't realize that it meant that I went to community college for minimum 2 years, and then I transferred to the 4-year school as a junior and then completed my senior year. I thought transfer students had to go to community college for 2 years, catch up to college level, and then start at the 4-year as a freshman. So number one, right? I didn't know that. The second part of a hidden curriculum, the second example that I have is in the process of applying to transfer. I applied to 3 schools, UC Davis, UCLA, and UC Berkeley. UC Davis was my first choice because, again, I wanted to get as far away as I could from the South Bay, but still within driving distance is how I explained it to my mom. And Berkeley was one of those things where it's like, well, let's just give it a try and see what happens kind of moment. And I got into all 3 schools, but because those norms and expectations and, those rules about being a college student in that process, I was not familiar with. I didn't know I had to submit a housing application along with my admissions application. So it's May when I found out that I got in. June, I struggled with a decision still. And I think it was more so because I originally wasn't going to apply to UCLA, but I was just told, hey, why not? And I said, okay, sure. And I got in. And then it just became real that, I could stay home. I could stay home and I could commute and I could do that. But inside of me, I just knew I had to get away. So it was Davis or Berkeley. But I didn't submit a housing application. And so I had no choice but to just pack up my little Honda Civic. And I packed up a hamper's worth of clothes, a few blankets, some San Marcos, if you know what that is, a very thick blanket, warm blanket. And I drove myself to Berkeley and I slept in my car for a couple of days because I went on a mission to secure housing. I said, I'm coming to Berkeley and that's it. I'm on a mission. I'm going to do this. And I finally was able to secure housing. And at the time, there weren't as plentiful housing opportunities as there are now in Berkeley. So that, it was a challenge, but I did it. And so that's, my hidden curriculum experience that I didn't know. Other didn't know kind of moments are students don't realize that in college, you can drop a class and you can receive a W, withdrawal, right? And so what they won't do is they won't drop the course and instead stick it out, do the hard work because that's what we're supposed to do, and then get which is worse than getting the W. So that's another example of that hidden curriculum. Those moments, norms, behaviors that are just sort of part of that college going culture and trajectory, I guess.
Oh, wow. When you were saying that, I wasn't picturing myself at first, although I saw myself in there when you kept talking. I was like, okay. I was imagining students that I have had. Literally, I'm imagining them in the room exactly where they were sitting, sharing what they shared, and see it differently, understand it differently. One, in general, grad school, I don't know, higher education could be difficult for people. There's just something about grad school that I personally attached to. It can be really difficult, and I have had a shared experience of grad school can be difficult. So it kind of normalized, oh, it's a struggle. But there's so many nuances to individual struggle, and the first gen experience, you're just having me see it a little differently, which again is my work to do, but I really appreciate that. And I'm also wondering if we could spend a little time, not just for professionals working with first gen, but also people who might be their experience. You were sharing offline about what people might be experiencing. What are those most common things that first gen people experience? And maybe we can shine a light on that, normalize it, and let's just start there. Actually, I don't want to go too far.
Sure. And part of that is that imposter syndrome. That's what am I doing here? Do I really belong here? I felt it so many times, somewhat at El Camino, but not too much because El Camino, if I look to my left, there's somebody who looks like me. If I look to the right, there's somebody who doesn't look like me, but somebody in front of me does look like me. So it was home for me, right? So I didn't experience it too much. And also I was a part of the Puente project at the time in my first year, which again, it's just a learning community, people who share similar experiences. And we didn't really talk about first gen then, but we did talk about that push and pull experience that we shared as children of Mexican American parents or Latino parents and immigrants and those type of experiences. But the first gen conversations and experiences came more so when I was in the transfer process. So at Berkeley, there wasn't a day, especially in my first semester there, where I was walking around campus in a backpack and oh my gosh, they're going to realize that I don't belong here. They're going to look at my transcripts and they're going to say, we made the wrong decision. Just kidding. We're giving your spot to somebody else. And no, it's not you. So it's that feeling like I don't belong, that imposter syndrome. But, at the end of the day, I had a 3.89 GPA at El Camino. I had one semester, I took 5 classes and I got a 4.0 GPA that semester. So it's yes, I did belong there. Yes, you made the right choice. But it's that feeling that you just walk around because you don't have that support system behind you. Not that they don't want to. It's just that they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Have that support system that rooting. I mean, they're cheering for you, but they don't know what they're cheering for, if that makes any sense. I remember my major was sociology in my undergrad, and my mom forever said that my major was psychology. And it wasn't until, my day of graduation where like, oh, you majored in sociology. Yes, that was my major. But again, it's not because she didn't want to. It's just I'm the first gen student here. So she is like part of the journey with me. Look, Mom, I remember her thinking, aren't you supposed to be doing homework? I'm reading a book. This is homework. This is what homework looks like. Because she was used to me being in K-12, working on worksheets or whatnot. So, but back to the imposter syndrome, that's something that I think I struggled with probably my entire time at Berkeley. And again, it came back again in grad school in the process of applying. I remember because it took about 7 years for me from when I received my undergrad to when I started my grad program. It was a 7-year period of not enrolling anywhere. And I think part of it was because I didn't feel worthy of it at the time. Two, I didn't know. I'm going back to that first gen. Like, well, what does grad school look like? What does that mean? And what is the process? And why am I going to do it? Is it worth it? And so I had somebody luckily to guide me along the way. But yeah, it's something that I continued to experience when we graduated from the program and when I started teaching part-time. Is the dean going to walk in here and say, oh, we chose the wrong person? Why are you teaching here? I don't think you belong here. It's just being in those type of settings that we couldn't have seen for ourselves because we just didn't have that model for us, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. It makes so much sense. You have me going through my own like college. You really have me going through my college journey right now. I can't even like pinpoint what I'm actually thinking about. There was a part that you just said that was like a bridge to how this translates to getting into the workplace. Mm-hmm. Like this is not something that's experienced in a college setting. And then all of a sudden when you graduate, like it just kind of dissipates and you go and become a career person. It doesn't happen like that. You just opened a little window. And I wonder if we can just go through for a moment. How does this translate to the workplace after graduation, or maybe not graduate, but either way, workplace?
Yeah. And I think for that, I sort of want to take us to another conversation, because then at that point, when you are in that professional setting, and so you start looking for, what does this professional look like in this? And what am I supposed to do here? And what am I supposed to do there? So you start emulating like those behaviors and expectations that you see around you. But then there's intersectionality, right? There's all of these other layers that make up who I am. Yes, I am a first gen, but I am also Latina. And at the time when I became a professional, I was one of the younger professionals. So then that was another layer that I had to navigate. So I sort of just started taking on the behaviors and norms that I saw around me. But unfortunately, it was of people that don't look like me. And so that was a difficult experience for me, because I was struggling with like being who I am, my authentic self, but at the same time still having to code switch, because I'm trying to navigate, because isn't that what a professional is supposed to do? Isn't this how I'm supposed to dress? Isn't this the language that I'm supposed to be using? So that imposter syndrome, I think, came out a little bit more the further I tried to push away from who I am and be the professional that I think people want me to be, based on what I saw. And it wasn't until we started having conversations, open conversations with other professionals. Oh, you feel that too? Oh, you still struggle with that? That again, I just became empowered to be myself and to and I guess like part of my struggle was like, I'm not being humble if I say, oh, yes, of course you chose the right person. Yes, I am supposed to be in this position. But no, it just feels empowering to just be able to claim your first gen status and realize that you are now paving the way for other professionals who are around you and who are watching you and you don't know it.
Yeah. Yes. There's like this thread or theme in what you're talking about. There's like this internal, almost like personal experience that people are having, even though it's in common,
Mhm.
but people are having this experience. And as you've talked about your learning journey, your history, that your aha moments were very much when conversations were being had, when you were in community with people, or when someone said something to you, even at your place now. It wasn't until a survey came out and then people start to realize, I'm not like, this isn't just me. Oh, there's more to it. I think that's really fascinating. It's not surprising. It's just fascinating. And it makes me think about anytime I do a training, I try to start with something that allows people to share what they think about the topic, because usually people share the same. Everyone's afraid of something. Everyone is usually in the same place. And those experiences, while they might seem very short at the time, really help people realize, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. So many people think that their experience is theirs or something's wrong with them, or a lot of the things that you're naming for yourself is so common. So thank you for even the way that you're describing all of this from your own personal experience and being very vulnerable in what your thought process was and your feelings about yourself. I really appreciate that. It makes it so tangible.
Thank you. And I think because working in education, and especially these days where, a lot of our initiatives are very equity driven and we're working with DEI, a language, and we're really trying to serve every student, but we're really trying to be intentional about the type of students that we're serving. As we are continuing to do that work, one of the pieces that is missing for me in the California community college system is that first gen student. And I say that because if we tackle the first gen student and if we change what we do to benefit that first gen student, I feel like then we can go in and tackle those types of issues and challenges maybe that disproportionately or underrepresented students face, because there are more students who are part of that first gen community. If we serve them, then we can go on and start serving and supporting, based on the additional layers of identity that individuals have as students. So yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like in the work that I do at El Camino College, I realize if I change my language and if I change our practices and if I change our processes to support that first gen student, then I'm supporting everybody. And I can, again, work with those extra details and those extra layers of identity and offer support as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm imagining that's layered in itself. There's like system stuff. And I just know that means a lot. I'm also thinking about the listener who is someone who's like a faculty member or the supervisor or anyone that's responsible for helping the development of a first gen person. And I'm wondering if there's anything specific that we can share with those people listening, like how they can be more participatory and helpful and involved in changing their practice.
Yeah, and I think it's about pausing, right? And just taking the time. I think regardless of the field that we are in, if we're in education or if we're in social work, we are very initiative driven. And it can become challenging to move from one to another. But I think it's very important to just make that intentional effort to pause and think about what others are experiencing and how people are experiencing your agency, your service, your class, your department, your, whatever it is that you are offering. Pause, and you kind of want to take that opportunity and put yourself in that perspective of the other. Right. And I think once we do that, and once we start having that conversation of living this as a first gen, then I think that's a good first step for any practitioner, again, in any field. I think just taking that time to have that pause, have that reflection, and see how the other is experiencing it.
Yeah. I can see that being super helpful. I can. Okay. I'm thinking about one more thing, and let's see if I can explain this right. But in DEI work, and that really is across various settings, in DEI work, there is more attention being brought to this concept of inclusive language, person first language, identity first language, and lots of resources out there. What I was sharing with you in thinking about this conversation is there's so many examples for how those topics are taught. But like first gen experience is literally nowhere to be found. It's not a part of the conversation at all. Like at all, Julieta. At all. Now, I'm not saying no one does it. I'm just saying I have yet to see it there. And not that you have the answer, but I'm just so wondering, do you have thoughts about that? Like, how could this be? I don't know. I just have to name that and say, this is missing.
It's missing. It's 100% missing. But there are, groups and organizations who are doing the work. So there's a Center for First Generation Student Success, which has tons of research and facts and almost like mythbusters on what first gen is. Because like what we were talking earlier about, well, is first gen mean related to immigration status? No. And that's like number one. And so I think it's a space to look at the research, and you might be surprised or you might not on what is already out there and what the research tells us about first-gen students and in comparison to non-first-gen students. So there are places where that research work is happening. But I think with everything, there's always room for more, and there's always room for improvement. There's always room for actual initiatives that are driven for that first-gen student. Last year at El Camino College, we hosted a collaborative where we invited high school counselors, coordinators, staff, anybody who works with a prospective student pretty much. And we had a first-gen training. We said our topic for the day is first gen, and we talked about defining the first gen students. We defined hidden curriculum. We defined imposter syndrome. We had engaging conversation. And our goal for that day was to, one, make you aware, but two, the beautiful moment that occurred is people are then like starting to talk about their own experiences. And three, they take this back to where they work, whether it's at a high school, a Boys and Girls Club, a YMCA or whatnot. And now they're having conversations on first gen students. And now they're helping others name it, right? And once you name it, then you're able to identify it and know how to work through it, right? And again, for me, it was empowering. Everybody has different experiences. For me, I felt confident and empowered as to like, oh, this is why. And now I know what I need. And for me, what I need at the time, anytime that I do start getting into that imposter syndrome, I know what helps me is external validation. And I know how to get it. I know where to go to get it. So that was a beautiful thing. So the resources are out there, but ultimately there can be more. And ultimately there can be some initiatives that are driven specifically for work around that first gen student. And our first gen students will become those first gen professionals, right? Which is why it's important to continue to have networks, continue to have conversations, continue to support one another and find those resources that will support our first gens as students and then ultimately as professionals.
I heard in there, you didn't say this explicitly, but what I'm going to do, there's like an invitation for accountability, which could be what to do from here. I know for me, I intend to take this conversation and use it intentionally in the classroom. I also will extend the invitation to people in my professional network to do that. And hopefully they take the invitation and decide to do the same thing. I really appreciate everything that you are sharing. Honestly, like in our prep for this conversation, I was already having realizations of what I didn't know. And you just exposed that more for me, like what I do not know, what there is to learn, what I can do right now to learn more, to take some action. So I actually found this very helpful. I'm certain other people did too. So thank you, Julieta, so much.
I'm so glad you did. And even for myself, the more I talk about it, the more I realize like I have so much more work to do as well. But I it's my passion. It's higher education is my passion. And again, I go back to that, 17-year-old navigating, filling out that financial aid application and filling out that admissions application. And I think I took a PSAT, but that's about it because I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, if somebody said do this, I did it, but I didn't like know why, right? So it's about telling others that, hey, I know, I don't know, but I kind of have an idea of what you might be experiencing. So let me try to help you. Oh, this means this, and this is why. It's always about the why for helping the first gen students. And I do want to mention too, as another resource, there is a National First Gen Day. So it's November 8th every year. And it's one of those things that you can find the hashtag on LinkedIn and other social media, I'm sure. The more we start sharing it, hopefully there's more awareness and more that's done to support our first gen students.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
I think for me, it's LinkedIn. I love connecting with others on LinkedIn. Send me a message there, send me a connection. I feel like social media, I use it for getting in touch with family or whatnot. But LinkedIn, I've shared with some friends that it's my feel good space because I get to hear people promotions or people who are looking for employment. And if I'm able to make a connection somewhere, it's great. So definitely look for me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to connect.
Perfect. I will be sure to put the link to your profile in the description.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much again for being here, Julieta. If anyone wants to get in contact with me, you can look at our website, livingunapologetically.com. On there, the social media handles. You can email us. There's access to freebies. You can also have access to my book, Bias Conscious Leadership, a framework for leading with action and accountability. Other than that, y'all share this episode with people, share with people in your network, have conversations, consider ways to take action, subscribe, like, share. I hope to connect with you soon. And until then, bye.